Uh, okay, great. Thank you, Liz. Okay, warm welcome to this scholarly event. We are part of a group known as Sigma Nursing, and it's a scholarship society for nurses. It's a membership society, and it's available all around the world. And we're part of the England chapter of this society, which is called the Phi Mu Chapter or Phi Mu Group. And because it's quite a big area and the number of members and so forth, we have 3 hubs. And this is the Southern Hub, which I coordinate, and I'm one of the vice presidents. My name's Dr. Janet Scammell, and I work at Bournemouth University, and the chapter's hosted by Bournemouth University, but it's very much a countrywide affair. I am the co-lead of the Nursing for Long-Term Health Research Centre at Bournemouth University, and would really like to warmly welcome you to this event and send the Professor Stephen Urser, who is our head of department, the Department of Nursing Science at Bournemouth University. He's also a member and sends his warmest wishes to you and really wishes he could join the event today, but he's got another commitment. But welcome from him as well. You'll have seen our program and our topic, which is nurturing emotional well-being. I hope you can see from the program, it's going to be a very interesting event with lots of different angles on the topic, which is wonderful, I think. I think before I look at the speakers and introduce them, I'd just like to say from the point of view of the topic that I think nursing and healthcare at the best of the times is really quite challenging, because really by the nature of the type of work, we are seeing people suffering, seeing death, that kind of thing, things that really are challenging from an emotional point of view. But then we've got the whole issue of the pandemic, which has superimposed upon the normal work, where the suffering has been even higher. And we're seeing greater death rates and in younger people as well, which has been really fairly challenging. And it's also gone on for a long time. So whereas we all started off with a little sprint in mind, perhaps it's turned into a marathon, and that is proving difficult for many people to handle. Hence why we thought we could look at the topic of nurturing emotional well-being. So our speakers today, we've got 3 speakers, and I hope I can share my screen with those ones. So this is just a reminder of the program. We're going to start off with Merzin Daz, who's the Trust Lead for Psychology and Psychological Therapies at Dorset Healthcare University NHS Foundation Trust. And then that's followed by a short session from Liz Westcott, Dr. Liz Westcott, who is the president of our society, and just going to tell you a little bit about that. And then we're going to have a little bit of break, a short break in the middle to just recharge our batteries. And then we're going to, after the break, going to have a session from Dr. Michelle Croston, who's a senior lecturer from the Faculty of Health and Psychology and Social Care at Manchester Metropolitan University. And that's going to be a bit interactive, so be prepared for that. I'm sure it's going to be great. And then another little break, and then Professor Debbie Holly is going to join us from Bournemouth University, who's Professor of Learning Innovation in our Department of Nursing Science. And she's going to take another angle on emotional well-being, but looking at it in a slightly different context around patients and health and well-being in that respect. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mesrin Daz, who is going to take us through our first topic, which is called Psychological PPE, How Do We Make It Happen? So if I could, I'll put you up on screen. Let's just come out of this. Right, okay. Right, just trying to get you up, Medrin.
Janet?
Yep.
I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
I wonder whether when we do that, it'll automatically.
Right, okay. Is that going to be possible? Liz, can I just check with you that Medrin can share a screen? Can you give her that permission?
Yes, I'll let me see.
I'm just going to trial it because it seems to me that I can.
Oh, no, yeah, you can. Oh, great. Lovely.
Yeah, fine.
There you go.
Great. That's lovely.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you. Right, Janet, I'll plow on, shall I?
Yeah, please do.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me to this lovely forum that you have. And how lovely to hear that you've got nurses from all over the world joining us. So I know that Janet threatened you all and said one of the subsequent sessions we're going to have is going to be a bit of a talk or a sharing session or interactive one, I think you said. This is going to be the same, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
Can I confirm before I start how much time we have for this particular session, Janet?
Up till 2 o'clock.
Up till 2 o'clock. Lovely.
Is that okay?
Something like, how many? Is it 18 minutes to go?
20 minutes.
20 minutes and counting. Come on then, guys. We can do it. Okay. So I'm going to just jump straight into this, if that's all right. And my laptop doesn't like presentation mode. So bear with me if I just stick to this format, because otherwise it'll chuck me out, which I would rather not hazard at this point. We all know the saying that we can't pour from an empty cup. And yet, as a psychologist, and I'm now head of psychology for Dorset Healthcare, you know, I've had many decades of trying to say to people that we need to look after ourselves. But it's been a very hard message to land. COVID has, however, changed things. I suspect because we're all terrified of dying and for a number of other reasons. And suddenly, emotional well-being has become a popular concept, not just amongst scholars or amongst certain clinicians, but amongst the world at large. In terms of general population, people are talking about how they're feeling because COVID has struck us with the force of a typhoon. And those of you who are familiar with Maslow's pyramid on the right-hand side, I think you might remember those early days when our physiological needs weren't being met. Yeah, and supermarket shelves were empty. And our safety needs just, flew out of the window because obviously the bulk of, think about safety rests with our physical safety. And with COVID, there's a very good chance of losing that. Love and belonging shot to pieces with social isolation and distancing and things like that. And the very words are enough to put the kind of fear of God into us, aren't they? Because if you talk about lockdown, it's like a capital L. And it kind of made me wonder last year in March, what was it going to be like? Was it going to be like a war footing? Were we going to have to shut all our lights? What would that be like? And esteem, where so many people around the world aren't able to do the jobs they were doing before or not doing them in the same way that they were used to doing. And therefore things like self-actualization like straight out the window. So emotional well-being, which is the thrust of today afternoon's topic, really took a hard knock, didn't it, for all of us? Because it's hard to feel a sense of well-being when every fiber of our being is being threatened. I won't labor the next slide, but I imagine some of us have lost colleagues, have lost friends and family members. If you work in health services, there will be an unprecedented number of people that you might have lost under your care. We're separated from people we love, as we said already. And I wonder whether some of us are actually feeling quite burnt out. And that's even before the second wave, which is now going all over the world in a huge proportion. Despite all that, I imagine that we have a mask that all of us keep on. Yeah, that all of us kind of need in order to present a professional front, certainly the jobs that we do. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and ask you to share in the chat function. Can everybody see the chat function, the conversation bar? Yeah, do you all know where that is? Okay, so in the chat function, would you mind typing, how are you really feeling right now? So if you were to pick 3 to 5 words, okay, so we don't want a thesis, just 3, 4 words. How are you really feeling right now? And pretty good is a lovely start. And someone says tired. We just keep these coming. Hopeful is lovely. Hopeful. Tired. Nervous and grateful. This is a year for gratitude, really, isn't it? Time for gratitude, absolutely. And spring does make us feel joyful, but sometimes anxious, yeah. Isolated, yes. Fed up, anxious, better, less optimistic, yeah. Low levels of anxiety for some of us, like a background level of stress, would you say? You know, that's just ongoing, isolated, but someone else is good and health and hopeful. And I read a meme recently on WhatsApp that all small things in life that we took for granted have now become the big things. And that is so true, isn't it? Because health and the well-being of our friends and our family and our loved ones are mega. And Jacqueline, thank you. Exhausted, lonely at times, challenged with your own emotional resilience, but yeah, more motivated on the other hand to take care of yourself and exercise. Super, super responses. And thank you so much for your honesty, gratitude coming in there. Absolutely. And things are on hold, and flexibility is the F word, isn't it? Because we non-stop make plans, change them, make plans, change them. And that's, I mean, after a point, it just gets tedious, doesn't it, to think of what's going to happen next week or next month, forget next year. And nonetheless, we feel resilient. So guys, that's a phenomenal amount of responses, and ditto to the above. Thank you, Martin, but that's a bit of a shortcut. We'll allow you that. That's fine. Thank you. I'll jump back to sharing the same presentation again. So all this happens behind the surface, but we present a mask to the world. Yeah, and the mask is, I imagine, how we want the world to view us at this point of time. Now, psychological first aid and psychological PPE is something which the World Health Organization has propounded for a number of years. And it's been used at times of other horrible atrocities all over the world. And I have this very simple question to ask you. If your finger was cut by a knife, would you leave it bleeding without care? Yeah, which is rather a silly question to ask, isn't it? Yeah, if we were chopping onions, just say, for example, I'm an Indian person by background, British Indian. So there's always some onions to chop, regardless of what you cook for dinner, you start with onions and garlic. So, okay, if you were to chop if you were to kind of slice your finger while you were slicing onions, we'd never just kind of carry on. We would look after ourselves physically, but we don't seem to be very good at, as human beings, at doing that for ourselves at an emotional level. So if you think, for example, of receiving an email, maybe a difficult email that's come through, do we read that and then stop what we're doing to ground ourselves, look after ourselves, and then carry on? Do we necessarily phone someone for support? Do we use any emotional plasters? That's much less normal for all of us, isn't it, than if we physically hurt ourselves. Yeah, so the question really is, what makes it so hard for us to look after ourselves? And on that note, I'm going to stop sharing again, invite you to use the conversation function again, the chat bar. So my question to you is, what makes it difficult for us to look after ourselves? Start typing now, if you would. So Heidi, you started us off with this very good one by saying family. Would it be okay to get you off mic to have a bit of a conversation?
That will teach me for being too quick.
Admire your courage. Thank you, Heidi, for doing that. When we say family, what exactly do we mean?
So, I mean, whether you've got little children or not, you know, you might have relatives who are elderly or poorly. So, especially as nurses, we tend to sort of look after other people first.
Absolutely. So it's not just family, is it? We tend to look after everybody else. But I'm not a nurse, but I speak as a healthcare professional. Absolutely. What is it about us and our makeup? And thank you very much, Heidi, for that. Okay. What is it, and addressing, you know, everyone now, that makes it so hard for us to look after ourselves? Why are we pre-programmed to put other people first? Peter, you're smiling. Would you like to jump in here for a minute? smiling on Zoom is dangerous?
Well, it's all what nurses learn, care for others. That's always at the forefront of our thinking, I guess.
Absolutely. And that's part of the training in the profession that we get into. So I'm wondering about this chicken and egg situation. Do you come to nursing because you're caring as an individual? Or do you become a caring individual after you become a nurse? Anybody, please feel free to unmute yourself and just shout out.
I think having recruited lots of nursing students, they would nearly always say, I want to be a nurse because I'm caring. I mean, that's the persona anyway that they always come up with. So how do we learn to be caring in life?
I think role modeling from parents and maybe other relatives or friends that we might see.
Role model.
I do think a lot of it is nature rather than nurture.
Right. Right. So if it's nature, are you suggesting that we are born with a caring gene of some sort?
Maybe people are born with more of a predisposition to want to be caring.
Right.
That is
so if we,
maybe from their life experience.
Okay. So if we think of, centers of the brain that look at emotions, that work with compassion, things like the hippocampus, the RAS, the limbic system, the insular cortex, we're postulating that perhaps we have a predisposition, a blueprint there.
Yes, but possibly who knows?
Who knows? Okay. And certainly that could be the nature bit, and then the nurture bit. In terms of the early life experience we've had, how many of you can remember being a caring child? Yeah, I can see Jihad nodding.
Yes, I am. Especially I have a big family that I really had to take that role of my youngest sibling. So I do remember that, yes.
Yes. And I would bet a month's salary that you're not the only one who's had to do that. And that perhaps as youngsters, more than one of us had to look after younger siblings or look after a parent who might have had a sickness or an illness of some sort. Or, as was Liz, I think you said, role modeling from other people who were carers in the family. Yeah, I was talking to a nurse as a patient yesterday in a different clinic that I run. And she was talking about how her mother was extremely caring, but her father was a waste of time, she put it. And if he did anything at all, he would become a hero, for feeding his children once in a while, say, for example. So she knew exactly what she wanted to follow. And that was clearly her mother as a role model. So when we're now talking about looking after ourselves first, that's quite an alien concept, isn't it? Because in a way, we've never done it. And to follow Liz's train of thought, it could even be within our genes or within our nature, as opposed to nurture. So now suddenly, because of the pandemic, for us to say to ourselves and each other, and to expect our teams to stop doing what they've always done, which is put other people, put other people first, that's quite a big ask and quite unnatural. Really. Yeah. I'm going back to the conversation, the chat bar, because you got some fantastic comments there about gender, about culture, about socialization, values, morals, so many reasons there that make you as a group, as a professional group, a really caring, lovely, humanitarian group. But when you're running on empty all the time, because you're giving over and above, then that's when things become a bit sticky, don't they? Yeah. So I'm aware that I have only 4 minutes left. What I'll do, if that's all right with you, is bring to your awareness this slide. Is this visible? Which says, let me just get rid of that. Psychological principles of first aid, is that there? Lovely. So in order to look after ourselves, and I implore you to do that, because as you go along and do the fantastic work you're doing looking after everybody else, take a little time for yourself to make sure you have the right human connections and not people who drag us down and are always asking for something from us or off us, but connections with people who can be restorative. And then creating a sense of calm for yourself. So on a daily basis, setting aside maybe half an hour, 20 minutes, whatever length of time you want, just for you to be able to be as peaceful as you can within yourself, to regather, to regroup. And for that, I wonder whether you do a bit of an exercise with me. Yeah, if you're willing, sitting where you are right now, I'd like you to think of 5 things that you can see around you in the room. And I don't need to know what they are, just to bring those to your awareness. But sitting still and quiet. And then becoming aware of 4 things that you can feel in your body. And then become aware of 3 things that you can hear. And then become aware of 2 things that you can taste. And finally, 1 thing that you can smell. How has your body changed in this last 1 minute? Has your body changed this last 1 minute? Yeah, I can see a little bit of a nod there, Janet. Could you tell us what you're feeling? In a few words?
Yes, in a few words, slowed me down. It slowed me down. My mind tends to be running all the time, and it's just made me think about something else.
Absolutely. So it takes so little time to actually create that sense of calm within us. So if you were to use very short, simple exercises like this, when you check in with your teams, when you check out of work, just to kind of ground yourself a little bit, especially if you're coming up against something which is more stressful than you'd like it to be. A little bit of grounding goes such a long way. And then creating a sense of collective and your own effectiveness. Wonder whether we could just quickly use the chat function again. And I'll stop sharing on this note. In the chat function, would you mind writing a few words to describe 1 thing that you're spectacularly proud of yourself for having achieved over this last year? And don't write it for me, write it for you, so you can celebrate it. 1 thing that you're really proud of. Becoming a vaccinator, how lovely is that? And a music theory exam, wow. Wow. Relationship with your daughter, new job at the university, super stuff coming out, losing 2.5 stone, oh my word. Gosh. Children. Yes, sure. Having them and surviving them through homeschooling, etc. Getting through a global pandemic, absolutely. Hardly easy. Anyone else typing? Starting my nursing course, how lovely. Welcome to the profession. Carrying on, Heidi, yes, certainly. Creating a platform to celebrate nurses and midwives. Wow, Ruth, that sounds lovely. 345 colleagues interviewed. My God, that's huge, huge. That is lovely. So despite the pandemic, it sounds like you guys have moved mountains, really. Individually, with your teams, and certainly collectively as a profession. So while you do the wonderful things that you're doing, just urge you to remember how important it is to create a sense of security around yourself. And the final principle of the 5 principles of PPE is hope. To know that we're all going to live to fight another day, fingers crossed. And that there's so much as possible because of the triumph of the human spirit over adversity. And never more so in history, and certainly not in our own lives, have we seen that coming to the fore. The compassion, the benevolence, the love, the care. So if anyone is well placed to do the jobs that you are, you certainly are. Janet, I could go on forever, but I'm conscious you've got a full agenda. So I'll stop here.
No, thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed that. Have you time for a few questions?
Of course.
Yes, that would be great.
Sure.
I've been looking at the chat and I haven't picked up any questions, but I'll just start things off. Do you think, Mesrin, that we do enough when we're preparing healthcare professionals and nurses, notably, to be aware of the sort of things that you're talking about this idea of looking after yourself as well as others? Do you think we do enough?
I think it depends on the course. So I don't think we can globally say, yes, we do, no, we don't. Because I imagine that, Janet, having worked with you in person, for example, I'm aware that I would imagine that all your students get a fantastic dose of self-care and that you could lead by example. And I'm sure people on the screen would do very similar stuff. But I imagine we're preaching to the choir here. So it's how to get the word out there to other people. How do we actually make sure that, because a lot of the tutors would come from our generation, where we've already been trained to think that actually patients first. So how do we turn that around? So it's not that we put ourselves first, but we're on at least an even footing. That old aircraft thing where you had to put your own oxygen mask before you can help someone else, but doing it together. Certainly. I'm sure I haven't answered your question directly, Janet. Apologies. I've gone around the houses with this, haven't I?
Janet, you're on mute.
Sorry. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can. I just wondered, you are preaching to the choir to some extent, but I just wondered whether there is sympathy out there for looking after yourself. I have certainly come across some environments that I've worked in where it's said, but it's not meant.
And of course, that's the case because we have a lot of policy now in place. Certainly in this country, I'm sure in others as well, but we're talking about staff well-being. We have things like the people plans. We have all sorts of culture departments. We have things that on paper will definitely tick the box in terms of creating more inclusion, more well-being, more equality. But it's up to us to breathe life into that. So those aren't just words, but we bring them to life and we practice them as we mean to. And I think we're at such an exciting time because, all our students who are now going through training at the time of the pandemic, hopefully it is a once in a lifetime experience, it won't happen too often, but what they will learn now and what they will pick up in terms of compassion, not only for their patients, but for each other, will be the lesson of a lifetime.
I agree. I think Honor is just saying that person-centeredness is a key to healthcare, but it does include us. And I think that is so true, isn't it? Has anybody got any other questions for Mesrin? I can't see any hands up anywhere.
In that case, I will love you and leave you.
Okay, can we give you a round of applause?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Take care and look after yourself.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye. It was great to get Mesrin's point of view. She runs an emotional well-being hub system within Dorset Healthcare, which is one of the local NHS trusts in Dorset. And it's a sort of fairly new initiative, but it's brought together lots of support mechanisms for staff, and it sounds really great. So if we finished with that topic, we'll then move on to Liz, who's going to just tell us a little bit, welcome you to our chapter and just tell you a little bit about it. Is that okay with you, Liz?
Yep, that's absolutely great, Janet. Oh, I'm just looking for my presentation, which just seems to have disappeared. So I'm not quite sure why.
Oh, don't worry, I'll carry on talking. I'm having terrible problems with my computer. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. She's off in the way, isn't it?
Right, yeah, no, it's
okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, here we are. Right, so let me just go to share screen.
Yeah. Welcome to those of you that have joined us since we started. I can see Joanne there and Marie-Louise, welcome.
Right, lovely. Okay, hopefully you can all hear me. So I know that an awful lot of you are Sigma members already, but for those of you that aren't, this next few minutes will hopefully tell you a little bit about Sigma and tell you a little bit about our chapter as well. Oh. So within Sigma, each group that's associated with Sigma is called a chapter. And in America, chapters tend to be associated with individual universities, but in the rest of the world, they are often associated per country. So our Phi Mu chapter is the All England chapter, and we're the only chapter that's in England. Even though we are associated with the whole of England, we still need to have a host university. And our host university is Bournemouth University. And they do a fantastic job for us. And the head of nursing at Bournemouth University, Professor Steve Ursa, is a great supporter of Sigma. And also great thanks to Janet Scammell, who is the vice chair and the Southern Hub lead for Sigma, but also based in Bournemouth University. And also a particular thank you to Janet and also to Dr. Les Gelling for helping to arrange today and for managing all of the online capacity for today. So thank you very much. So the vision for Sigma is to be connected, empowered nurse leaders transforming global healthcare. And its mission is developing nurses anywhere to improve healthcare everywhere, which really shows the kind of global nature of Sigma, that it's not just taking nursing academically forwards, but actually it's to transforming global healthcare, whether it's through practice or research or education or administration or however it is. Every single nurse in the world plays their part. And I think that's been a very good salutary lesson for us to learn during this COVID pandemic, that actually whether you are working frontline in practice or whether you're an academic or whether you're working in administration, every nurse who's on the register has got a part to play in their role as a nurse and in helping and protecting patients. So we have over 135,000 members now of Sigma, and the chapters I was talking about, there are now 540, more than 540 chapters, and they're in more than 100 countries around the world. And Sigma itself was started in 1922, and it was founded by just 6 nurses that were based in Indianapolis. That's why now the headquarters of Sigma is still in Indianapolis. And the conference that's held every 2 years, the big biennium conference that's held every 2 years for Sigma, every other time it's held is also held in Indianapolis. So we have 3 regional hubs. And our Southern Hub, as you know, is led by Dr. Janet Scammell. Our Midlands Hub is led by Raluca Wagner. And our Northern Hub is led by Professor Kirsten Jack. And we set up the hubs initially so that when we had our meetings, we would have them in different geographical areas to make attendance easier for people who lived in those particular areas. But one of the things that really has come about through COVID, which has been a very positive thing, is that actually our meetings for the last year have been purely online. And it's meant that everybody has been able to access the meetings far more effectively than they did before. So I think once we are able to meet face to face again, we will still have a very big online component of meetings because we're able to just be much more inclusive to all of our members the UK, but also from Europe and the rest of the world as well. So it's given us a great opportunity to get to know people much better. So we have a committee structure. So we have a board of directors. And then, as you see, we've got the vice president and the hub leads. And we have a number of standing committees. So we've got a research committee, governance, leadership succession, fundraising and finance, awards and recognition, and communications. And then we also have kind of task and finish groups. So for instance, the conference that we're planning for the 8th of July, we've got a task and finish group organising all of that. And if you want to know anything more about the committees, then please do email me or your hub lead. We'd be delighted to chat to you. So obviously there are loads of great reasons to become a member of Sigma. You have access to a fantastic international network of nursing experts, mentors and coaches. You can share experience and knowledge in your own nursing specialism. There are local, national and international opportunities for you to share work and learn from others, either through events like this or for the big international conferences. There are lots of leadership opportunities, research and practice development awards. And also we have, as we've mentioned, our local and national scholarship events. And for all of that, your membership costs less than a weekly cup of coffee. So if you can put aside the cost of a cup of coffee into a jar, then every year you'd have enough money to be able to renew your membership. All of the resources that are available through Sigma are just a fantastic opportunity for you to be able to meet people around the world and to gain expertise in your particular area of nursing as well. So if you're not a member of Sigma and you would like to join, then please do check out our website, the address of which is just up on the screen, and either email me, our Chair of Governance, Lynn Parander, or do email me directly if you want to have more information. And we accept student members and postgraduate members and also nurse leaders. And by nurse leaders, we mean anybody who is in nursing who has any type of a leadership role. So you could be a team leader, you could be a module leader, you can be a community leader. So anybody who can demonstrate that they've worked within nursing in a leadership capacity, we really welcome applications from you. And the student members, generally those student members are asked to join the organisation rather than be able to join directly. And again, you can find out more information by just emailing myself or Lynn. So it's a fantastic organisation to be a part of. And I've made some brilliant friends through being in Sigma. And for those of you that aren't members at the moment, then please do reach out and make contact with us, and we'd be more than happy to welcome you and tell you a little bit more about what you can expect from Sigma. Okay, I'll hand back to you, Janet, and happy to take any questions if there are any through the chat line as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Liz. Thanks for just letting people know what Sigma is, because there'll be a number of people in the Zoom call that are really not too sure. But yes, do contact people, just ask informal questions and we'll be very happy to help you. Now, our next part of the program is going to be a little short break of 5 minutes just to stretch our legs. We're running very slightly behind time, but not too bad. And then when we come back, we'll be hearing from Michelle, who's going to take you through her session. I'll put that one, the heading up on the screen in a moment, but it's now about 40 minutes past. If we just come back at 2:20, that would be great, and we'll get on with the second part of the session. Thank you very much. Okay, hello everybody. Can you hear me? Hope you can.
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you fine, Janet.
Great, thank you, Debbie. Okay, welcome back after our little short break. Thank you to Liz for her last presentation. And we're going now to move on to Dr. Michelle Croston, who is a senior lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University, who's got a very interesting session title for us. So I'm going to let her introduce that. Michelle, are you going to share screen or how do you want to do this? I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to go to the part of the show now where everybody hates. Can we actually get the slides up? Just bear with me. So yeah, so today's session, I'm going to kind of talk you through the practice of compassion and self-compassion. And I have made reference within the title to kind of some of the principles around that. So here we go. So are we seeing the slideshow?
Yep, we are. Thank you, Michelle.
Brilliant. Thank you. So yeah, so thank you very much, first of all, Janet, for inviting me today. So I'm excitedly nervous is probably what I'm going to say. So we're going to talk about, for the next, up to the next 40 minutes, we're going to talk about the role of self-compassion in emotional well-being. And the lotus in the mud is probably something that's quite resonates with this topic, as in without the mud, there would be no lotus. So actually, emerging from the mud comes this beautiful flower. And the act of compassion and self-compassion can be viewed as a way of looking into the mud in order to be able to enable this flower to emerge. So for the next 40 minutes, we're just going to go through some theory around compassion, understanding what compassion is and self-compassion, utilising some Eastern and Western philosophy to try and really understand what we mean by this terminology. I'm going to talk about some contemporary research into this area, and then I'd like to invite you on a self-compassionate break with me as well as we move towards the end of the presentation as well. Feel free to use the chat box as we move through the presentation, and it was really useful the first session as it kind of pulls through some of the themes that we're going to talk about throughout the presentation as well. So what do we mean by this term compassion? So we're all professionals on the call and we all have a working understanding of what compassion means to us. So for the purpose of this talk, I kind of looked at different definitions. So for those who are familiar with the work of Paul Gilbert, who's done a lot of work around the compassionate mind theory, and there's a lot of his work that's kind of peppered throughout this talk, he believes that compassion can be defined in many ways, but the essence is a basic kindness with a deep kind of desire of one's suffering and also to be able to alleviate this suffering. So that's kind of a traditional kind of Western view of this. Then we're moving on to Ganesh, who's a Buddhist monk, who also brings into this sensitivity to suffering in ourselves and others with this deep motivation and commitment to kind of alleviate and prevent it. Now, thinking about my own kind of perspectives on this and coming from a nursing perspective, I actually really like the last one, because within this definition, and I think that's something as a nurse, it took me a lot of my career to work out, that actually a lot of suffering and pain cannot be fixed and solved but actually just by sitting with that suffering and helping people in a compassionate way, we can move people to a different place. So just to say, my background is in HIV care, and a lot of the time we did have to sit with a lot of suffering that could not be fixed or solved. So I think for me, the underlying principles of compassion involves understanding that suffering and then finding ways to alleviate this suffering as we move forward. So if you've got any thoughts on what compassion means to you, feel free to drop that in the chat as well. Yeah, I love that quote as well, because I think it just typifies kind of as a nurse what that kind of means to me as well. So thank you. So as we say, why do we need compassion? So drawing on the work from Paul Gilbert, who looks at the compassionate mind theory, Paul kind of articulates really well. And sometimes when I'm really struggling, this comes to my mind. So he says, we have brains that have been built for us and not by us. So actually, throughout this evolutionary theory, we've got a complex bit of kit in our brain, for want of a better word. So we've got the old brain functioning, kind of our reptilian brain. And over the last 2,000 years, we've kind of had the prefrontal cortex built on. So this ability to kind of think about thinking as well. Also, Paul mentions that our brain is working on lots of different algorithms and programs at a time. So if A happens, then do B. So that kind of relates to our fright, flight, and freeze response. So these really basic drive systems that we have built in ourselves as well. And I think definitely for myself over the past 18 months or so, and even before that, kind of really getting familiar with how my autonomic nervous system works, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, kind of really helps to put this into context. So within this compassionate mind theory, he articulates that we have three core emotional systems: the drive, the threat, and the soothing system, that have evolved over time and that can easily get out of balance. Also, there's this notion that because of our new brains and this ability to think about thinking, and we probably wonder, and we've got this kind of level of consciousness, probably not many species that we know has this kind of ability to think about thinking. We can get caught up in these kind of loops of thinking. So back in the day when our brains were designed to keep us safe from that saber-toothed tiger rocking up at the door, we would respond to that threat and then move on. But now we get caught up in thinking about, oh, I should have perhaps maybe done this differently, or I should have done that differently, rather than just kind of moving on from that, which can kind of drive that distress. Also thinking about, as humans, we are shaped by our experiences that we have little control over. So to put that into some context, if I'd have been kidnapped at birth and raised by the mafia, it's highly unlikely I would be sat here today talking to you about compassion. So sometimes, as Jung reminds us, we meet ourselves 1,000 times along the path in these different disguises. And also it might be worth bearing in mind that although we didn't create our brains, so as Paul says, we've got brains that have been built for us and not by us, it is actually our responsibility to understand what programs are running in our minds. So what algorithms are we working on at the minute, to try and understand our human behaviour. And this process of self-compassion is a way that we can understand this complex distress as well. So for those art fans amongst you, this is Vincent van Gogh's painting of Starry Night, and it's probably one of my favourite paintings for lots of different reasons. So Vincent allegedly painted this, and it's supposed to be the view from his asylum. When researchers have gone back in time to look at the room that he was supposed to be in, there was actually no window. So that kind of begs the question, how did he paint such a wonderful view in a room with no window? Also as well, the yellow in the poppy, in the sunflowers, is actually a side effect to his medicines as well. So there is lots of things about kind of thinking about that analogy, the lotus in the mud. So sometimes from all this adversity, we kind of get some great things. And one of the main reasons why we get to share Vincent's beautiful work is that human connection he had with his brother. So without Vincent's brother, then it's unlikely that we would have been able to see a lot of his masterpieces as well. And just a final quote there before moving on from Vincent: let not us forget that little emotions are the greatest captains of our lives, and we obey them without realizing it. So for me, that reminds me of those times when you fall in love and you end up doing things that you know, you're not in your brain either as well. So sometimes we are driven by our emotions as well. And that's really important when we start to think about compassion and self-compassion also. So I'm not sure if anybody's seen this film before, Inside Out. Yeah, it's possibly one of my favourite films. So when we're thinking about how emotions drive our brains, kind of moving on from Vincent's kind of quote, we can see joy's there driving the brain, but we also get to see within that film what happens when anger's driving the brain, what happens when fear and kind of sadness is driving the brain as well. And also just a note, sometimes fear gets a lot of bad press, but there's actually nothing wrong with fear, because actually fear sometimes helps us to remember that we're in danger as well. And sometimes fear can help protect us moving forward. Sometimes it can hold us back, but actually fear has a good evolutionary response, because actually if we was all fearless, we probably would have been extinct many years ago as well. Just gonna have a quick look in the chat. Yeah, no, it is a great film. I love this film. I make virtually everybody watch it because I just think it articulates, and there's a great moment within the film where they articulate what empathy is, where joy comes near sadness, and it just kind of really demonstrates how we use different emotions as well. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend you do so. So going back to Paul Gilbert in his work, so thinking about this, and our first speaker did touch on these as well. So we have 3 systems within our brain. So we have the drive system, which motivates us towards resources. And that's part of, you know, dopamine levels. And that is our wanting, pursuing, achieving focus center in the brain. We also have the threat system. And that happens within our amygdala, and it, you know, adrenaline comes out, and it's our feelings of anger, anxiety, and disgust. And these are really, this is kind of one of our first system that helps keep us safe. And then we have the soothing system, which helps us kind of stay connected and keep us protected as well. So when going back to what I talked about previously, about having these brains that have been built for us and not by us, but we need to understand what programs are running in our brain, it very much relates to this kind of theory. So when I kind of reflect back, when I'm in that reflecting mode, I find I spend a lot of time in either threat or drive, threat or drive, threat or drive. But actually moving into the soothing system, and that's fine, you know, we can definitely in our working life, you know, we need a bit of threat sometimes, we need, you know, to move causes forward. Definitely as a HIV activist, I got angry a lot, and that helped to move things forward. It helped with my drive. But equally, if I'd have just been angry, we wouldn't have got anywhere. So we had to find ways to kind of connect and get into that soothing system as well. So one of the main ways to kind of think about our brains is trying to work out what system is operating and how we access our soothing system as well. So the threat and the drive system is very much our sympathetic nervous system, with our soothing center being very much our parasympathetic nervous system as well. So how does this link to self-compassion? So we've given you a working understanding of what we mean by the term compassion. So what is self-compassion? Now, I guess for me, when I started kind of reading and exploring around this subject, it was kind of this notion about learning to be a good friend to yourself. And I really like the idea of learning to become your inner ally rather than your inner enemy. So while I was preparing for this session, my inner enemy did come out. You know, my self-critic was on fire. You know, you can't do that session with them. Oh, what will they think? You know, it was kind of really giving me a hard time. And I just acknowledged that actually, you know, thank you for alerting me to the fact that, you know, I'm going into uncharted territory, but I need to be a bit more compassionate with myself. So some of the core elements involved in self-compassion is this self-kindness, also referred to within the literature as loving, common humanity, or this connectedness again, and this mindfulness or presence. So the word mindfulness, depending on how you feel about it, can have a lot of connotations. So ideally, the 3 core components of self-compassion are kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. So again, this idea with the self-kindness, reminding ourselves that, you know, we all fail sometimes, and kind of instead of beating ourselves up, putting that caring arm around our shoulders as well. And I really like the idea that actually I've got my own inner cheerleader, that in times of need, I could get them to put their arm around me as well. This sense of common humanity, and that we're all interconnected. And I really love this idea that we're all, as humans, we're all this flawed works in progress, and that everybody fails. And that actually by making mistakes is part of life, and we all experience this hardship. And this part of kind of connecting to this suffering that we all suffer at some point, and we just want kind of that kind of understanding about that. And also the mindfulness aspect to self-compassion, being aware of moment to moment. So I guess we all have that idea of racing forward and thinking about what could be, or kind of drawing on the past. And also, whilst we acknowledge kind of we're suffering, we're in a better place to be able to deal with that suffering also. And the leading thinker in this work is Kristen Neff. She does a really good TED Talk for anybody who's interested in that work as well. So picking up on some of the threads from the previous talk. So this is a physiology of self-compassion and self-criticism. So this is on the left, the kind of evolution of mindful compassion and the brain. So there's this acknowledgement that we've got the new brain and the old brain system, and that we can be mindful about what's happening for us in this present moment. So when we become mind aware, so when we're mindful of what's going on basically in our mind, we can then draw on compassion. So we acknowledge what's going on for us and kind of where we're at. What I thought was really interesting was how we, with these evolutionary systems, how our stress responses can be turned inwards. So the idea of, you know, the flight response, actually when we turn it inward, it's that self-criticism. You know, we acknowledge that we're scared and we want to run away from this, but actually we turn that into self-criticism. The flight aspect, this isolation, removing ourselves from the danger. So we isolate ourselves away from whatever we're kind of scared of. And the idea of this freezing, this rumination, so we can't move on. And that was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me. You know, why am I constantly thinking? You know, I'm stuck, I'm ruminating as well. And the idea of the counter argument of this is that self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness as a way to try and alleviate this stress response. So for those who are interested and want to know how self-compassionate they are towards themselves, there is the Self-Compassionate website, and this is a validated screening tool that's used in most research around self-compassion. So it's really good that you can fill in, you get a numeric score with that. And I guess for me, I thought, oh gosh, great. Inner critics out in force. This is something else I'm going to fail at. I'm going to fail at being compassionate. Actually, it's fine. Just think it's just a number that you can work on if you are mindful that you're not being very kind to yourself as well. But it does give a score, and it's good for research purposes as well. So thinking about some of the things we talked about in our first talk around about self-compassion and how hard we find it to be kind to ourselves. So some of the misperceptions that were coming through that we're picking up here was actually, is being self-compassionate just being throwing myself a pity party? Well, no, actually, the research suggests that if you engage in self-compassionate practices, you're more able to get that perspective taken. You know, coming from a position that actually we're all human, we're all flawed works of art, and actually we all make mistakes. So we're not stuck in that rumination. Oh my God, that was terrible. They're never going to invite me back. It's awful. It's terrible. It's all doom and gloom. We actually have that kind of self-compassion and that perspective taken. Also as well, thinking about self-compassion it's for wimps. There isn't, it's, you know, I need to be tough to get through my life. actually the research shows that people who are more self-compassionate, it actually requires a lot of courage to be self-compassionate. And actually people who are more self-compassionate find it easier to deal with tough situations such as divorce, trauma and pain. Coming back to some of the guiding principles around self-compassion, about that self-kindness and that common humanity, that we all have difficult times as well. I think this was a good one that we picked up within the chat. I don't need to think more about others and not myself. Being self-compassionate is way too selfish for me and self-focused. Now, when I started doing this work, I was a single mom, I was doing my doctorate, there was loads of things I was doing. And I thought actually taking time out from me when I should be there for my family was a really selfish thing to do. But actually removing myself and spending time in these practices actually made me a nicer person. I'll be honest about that. So the family loved me going off on these kind of retreat type things, because actually it enables me to be more caring and supportive and compassionately focused for other people, and a lot more forgiving because I'm in a different space myself as well. I'm just going to pause for the chat. If there's anything that I've gone over that you'd like me to clarify, then please feel free to ask. There will be questions at the time. I'm just super excited to get to the self-compassionate break with you guys. So when thinking about self-compassion, I did start to wonder if this was more like navel gazing. Okay, so is it self-compassion or is it self-esteem? And actually, self-esteem is a positive evaluation of self-worth, whereas self-compassion is related to an ever-changing landscape. So actually, although the two words can be used interchangeably, actually compared with self-esteem, self-compassion is less tingent on kind of physical factors such as attractiveness and performance. So actually our sense of self and self-worth will change over time, and self-compassion is probably more withstanding that self-esteem that we can attract to kind of maybe some physical attributes as well. And what I like more about the term self-compassion is it doesn't require you comparing yourself to somebody else. It's just acknowledging that we're all imperfect. And I really like that thought, that actually we're all just doing the best we can given the situations we find ourselves in. So when thinking about self-compassion, there's a really good analogy within the literature that talks about the idea of this yin-yang of self-compassion. So for those familiar with the symbol of the yin and the yang, so the yin is more of the feminine energy and the yang is more of the masculine energy. And as you can see within the symbol, one doesn't exist without the other. So this kind of perfect balance and these kind of opposites as well. So when thinking of self-compassion, there is a danger to think, oh, it's all just about kind of being kind to myself, being nice, and actually quite passive within that. So the yin aspect of self-compassion. But actually within self-compassion, there is the yang aspect to self-compassion. And the yang aspect is this kind of idea of acting in the world. So when we think about that mother bear who's protecting her cub, that's kind of your yang aspect to self-compassion. So sometimes it's that protecting energy that warns you about danger. It's that providing system and that motivating system. So the system within you, that self-compassion, that reminds you to set that boundary. Because actually, if you don't set that boundary, you won't have time to look after yourself. So a really good question to start thinking about when we're talking about self-compassion is, what do I need now? So kind of really tuning into thinking about, do I need to be with myself more? Do I need more comforting, soothing and connection? Or do I actually need to put some boundaries in place? Do I need to be motivated on that next goal? What is it that I need right now to help in the most with my self-compassionate practice? So thinking about the world in which we work and within nursing. So as I became more familiar with self-compassion and could really see how self-compassion would help, I wanted to look within the nursing literature to think about how did that translate into the nursing workforce. So there is a really good concept analysis on self-compassion, but unfortunately the the concept analysis focuses on how as nurses we teach self-compassion. So there's very little evidence around there about how we actually learn to be self-compassionate towards ourselves. And it's really interesting, as preparing for this talk, I did manage to contact the author of that paper, and we've kind of got a good discussion going around this now, because her work was done within HIV care. So that was a really good, another great outcome from today's kind of presentation. Also as well, the research exploring self-compassion in nursing also looked at a positive correlation between emotional intelligence. So the more self-compassionate you are, the more emotional intelligence kind of raises that as well. Also, there's been links to increased self-compassion and then onwards compassion towards others as well. So there is a definite positive correlation of why we kind of invest our time. A lot of the research that's out there is more within the psychological field of health rather than nursing per se. There has been a lot of kind of, I don't know if it's just where I read, but a lot of attention placed on the concepts of compassionate leadership and self-compassionate leadership. This is thought to be an important attribute within a leader, having this compassionate ability and self-compassionate attribute. What I've just put is a cautionary note to myself, because actually context is important. And going back to our first session, thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and our kind of evolutionary system, if we're in threat mode, if we're just working on that being safe, can we actually access these higher functions, these higher order functions of being compassionate? If we're just stuck in survival mode, if we're thinking about just surviving day to day with our basic needs, could we actually access these higher functioning abilities? So I think it's important, really important in a leader, but also context is important, because the environment shapes who we are also. I'm just going to pause and look at the chat. How can you encourage nurses to find time for self-compassion? Any tips? That's a really great question. So I think it is again kind of picking up on some of the questions that I've asked before. It's that role modelling and kind of building it into the working day as well. As we go through some of the exercises, it is about kind of practicing. So at the first sign of trouble, I'm a little bit of a breath holder, which is the wrong thing to do, because it signals to my nervous system that I'm not safe. So actually giving students simple techniques, or nurses simple techniques that they can use ahead of a crisis is probably a really good way to do that. So I'm just acutely mindful of time. So I want to kind of invite you now on a self-compassionate break with me. So as we move in within this self-compassion break, this is the part where my inner critic is on fire, because I'm going to have to stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing the screen in a second when I'm going to tell you what the self-compassionate breaks look like. And then this is a part where we're just going to experience this together. I don't intend to traumatize you through this process at all, but please look after your own emotional safety. If anything arises for you that doesn't feel right in the moment, then just kind of back away from that. When the reading around self-compassion, it likens this process to, the backdraft that firefighters have. Sometimes when we've been really mean to ourselves, and then we start letting in kind of a bit of compassion, it can feel a bit overwhelming. So if you're feeling anything that you're uncomfortable with, then just back away from the practice as well. So we're going to walk you through a couple of practices now. So I'm just going to let you know what's ahead of you, and then I'm going to invite you to have the practice with me. It may be that you're not in a place or a space where this is possible. So if that is not the case, then please feel free just to imagine yourself going through the exercises and use the power of the mind instead. And if you just want to sit back and relax, the choice is yours, but the invitation is to join us as well. So we're going to start in a second by just observing our breath. Then I'm going to invite you to do some rhythmic breathing with me. Then I'm going to talk you through this now, so we don't have to do it to spoil the flow of the exercise. But extending the breath is a really useful exercise. So however many counts you breathe in for, if you just extend the breath, either 1 or 2 breaths out. So if you're breathing in for 4, and then breathe out for 6. That's a really powerful signal to your sympathetic nervous system and your vagus nerve that's roaming around to let your body know you're safe. So you just kind of extend that breath. We're going to do a little bit of Qigong. So for those who are aware of Qigong, it's a Chinese system of physical exercise and breath work. Now, when I first started doing yoga, my Buddhist friend told me that was meditation for fidgets. So for me, Qigong is a bit like breath work for fidgets. I'm just reminding you, there's a gentleman there called Bodhi who does a really good app for Qigong that is absolutely brilliant. So we're just going to go through one of his techniques here. Then we've got time. I'm going to just guide you through a breathing meditation using yin and yang energies. Again, if your mind, if you're thinking, oh gosh, I didn't know I was signing up for that, don't worry, just relax, just do whatever you need to do. If your brain begins to wander, it's a bit like a puppy, as the photo says. That's exactly what your brain's supposed to do. Just gently and mindfully bring it back to your breath. And just keep doing that. Just don't chase after it. Just keep the thought, just keep gently bringing it back to the breath as well. So I'm going to stop, before I stop sharing my screen and get ready, is there any questions or anything you'd like to know before our self-compassion practice? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And we're just going to stand up so you can see me for the Qigong exercise. This required me tidying the office today. So we're just going to start by just kind of coming into our bodies. So I spend a lot of time, and I've just talked to you for the past 20 minutes. So I've just spent a lot of time in my brain. So I'm just going to come into my body. So if you sat down, just notice your feet on the floor. If you may want to stand up, and that's absolutely fine. Just notice your feet. Just allow yourself to notice your legs. And just maybe sit a little bit taller. And just raise your chest and just draw some attention to your body as you arrive in this moment. So we're just going to start now by observing our breath. If you wish to, you may wish to close your eyes or lower your gaze. If you don't wish to, that's absolutely fine. Just start by noticing your breath. As you breathe in through your left nostril, just observe how the breath flows in through your nose, glides over the roof of your nose and down through your right nostril. Just observing your breath. There's no need to label or judge your breath. Just observe your breath as it glides through your left nose, top of the bridge of your nose, and down the right nostril. Just spending a couple of minutes observing your breath. This natural ebb and flow of your breath. Now I'm going to invite you to inhale for 5 counts and exhale for 5 counts. So I'm going to count the breaths for you till we get into a rhythm, and then I'm going to leave you to breathe also. So taking a nice deep breath in, breathing in from your diaphragm to the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing out to the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing in, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing out, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just taking over now, breathing in for 5 and breathing out for 5. And if that feels too much for you, just breathe in the same amount of breaths as you exhale. And just really observing your breath. Breathing in for 5 And then out for 5. On your next round of breath, I'll invite you to exhale for 6 counts. So breathing in for 5. If this feels too much, go back to the rhythm you was doing before, or just go back to noticing your breath. Breathing in for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing out 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing in for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathing out for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And just observe that breathing and seeing how that feels and lands in your body. Now I'm just going to invite you to join in with me as we do some Qigong. So you may want to stand up for this, or you can do it sat down if you haven't got any space. So what we're going to do is we're just going to play around with some energy. Okay, so Qigong is all about energy and balancing this yin and yang aspect. So again, just get yourself nice and grounded on the floor. It's a good job you can't see all of me, or else you'd see my teddy bear slippers. So just kind of get yourself nice and grounded. Just bring your hands up, kind of in a cup between your lungs. And we're just going to take a nice deep breath in. As we breathe in, as we get to our nose and above, we're just going to turn our hands up. And we're just going to stretch round as we sigh out. And we're just going to breathe in. Just going at your own pace. And then as you get up, you're just going to turn your hands over and then bring that down. And again, just in your own time, as you breathe in. And then nice and up, and then just breathe out. If you feel like you need some more energy, as you go up, you can also just come to the tips of your toes as you come down as well. Just in your own time. To invite you to do a couple of rounds of that with your own breath. So drawing the energy in, drawing the energy out. One last time. In. And then out. And then just invite yourself to come back to a natural breath. I'm going to sit down and just get yourself nice and comfy as we move into our last self-care break. So we're just going to guide you in a visualization using the yin and yang breath. So it may be that you'd like to close your eyes or lower your gaze. I'm not going to close my eyes, but I am going to lower my gaze. So do whatever feels comfortable for you. So I'm going to invite you to put your hands in some different positions as well. So just move back from the desk if it's if you're a bit close to that as well. So just lowering your eyes or closing your eyes. Just come to a comfortable seated position. As you observe the breath, see if you can just extend the breath as if you're sighing out. As if you're letting go of something, and then just invite your breath to settle into a rhythm, any rhythm that you like. Now I'm going to invite you to focus on your in-breath and pay attention to each breath. I invite you to place both your hands on your heart and just notice as you breathe in, your hands rise as your lungs fill with oxygen. As you breathe in, imagine you're breathing in the yin energy of loving, connecting presence. As you breathe in, your body is filled with this kind, connected, nurturing energy. As you breathe in, allow it to fill your entire being. If you're a visual person, you might want to visualize a white or golden light as you breathe in. As you breathe in, you are breathing in loving, connected presence. See if you can let this yin energy nurture you, comfort you, and heal you. Now we're going to let go of the focus on the in-breath and the yin energy, and we're going to focus on the out-breath. I'd like to invite you to move your hands from your heart and place them on either side of your lap with your palms facing upwards. Now focus your attention on your out-breath and breathing out. As you breathe out, I invite you to get in touch with your yang energy, your life force, your active energy. This life force can protect you, provide for you for what you need, or motivate you to change. See if you can get in touch with your yang self-compassion energy. As energetic flows in, it moves through each out-breath in the body. As you observe your yang energy, you may feel it arising from your spine and moving up your spine. As you breathe out, straighten your back and notice the energy rising out of the top of your head, allowing this energy to flow through you, move through you and radiate out into the world with each out-breath, feeling the power of your yang life force. And now bring the two together, bringing your awareness to the breath. As you breathe in yin, compassion, nurturing, soothing comfort, healing energy. And as you breathe out the yang, compassionate energy. Breathing in, breathing out, observing the ebb and flow of your breath. And when you're ready, letting go of the focus of your breath and bring your intention back to your body. And now come back to this place and time, being fully present in the here and now. Maybe notice any noises around you, bringing awareness to your body. And if your eyes are closed, just gently blinking them open. So thank you so much for taking a self-compassionate break with me. So I'll be really interested, or my self-critic, I should say, we're very interested to hear how that was for you and see if you know how that felt. So thank you very much for listening. And I'm mindful, I'm very sorry I went over time, so sorry.
Oh, don't worry at all, Michelle. Well, I feel really chilled out. I don't know about anybody else. That was lovely to just spend some time just thinking about where you are and how you are, and to separate yourself from other things. So I feel really good after that. Has anybody got any questions for Michelle? Got some great feedback here. Good to pause and just be in the moment. Absolutely. I feel lovely and lighter. Yeah, that's a great description. Great relaxation.
Yeah, I think I am a breath holder, so the first time of anything going wrong, I'm there holding my breath, but it's really good to come back to as well.
Yeah. Michelle, I know you don't mind people having your email, which I think was on the program. So would it be okay to invite people to email you if they had any questions about your presentation?
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For myself, I really loved hearing the science, if you like, and particularly the juxtaposition of the Eastern and Western sort of worldviews. Thinking, I really resonated with me your thing about being a nurse and wanting to fix things. That's a big issue for me, and obviously sometimes we can't fix things, particularly during this pandemic. You've got some great comments coming in here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope it's okay with you, but just to try and not keep people over, I'm just wondering if we can go straight into the next presentation, which is from my colleague, Professor Debbie Holly, who's got an extremely chilled audience to talk to.
Well, I was just going to say thank you to Michelle, because my fight or flight response has kind of calmed right down before presenting. So it couldn't have been better. Thank you ever so much. So I'm going to do the stressful square screen stuff. Janet, I can see you. If you could just give me a little nodding head if you can see.
Yes, we can see your introductory slide, Debbie.
Lovely. So, well, good afternoon. So I decided that I would start this presentation with a typical representation of nursing, which is this heart and hands combination. So I think there's really some echoes of what Michelle was talking about there. And I just wondered if you'd like to pop into the chat as I go through the first couple of slides. What does this image say to you about nursing today? Is it still the same? So if we add in the digital, which is my area, we tend to see far harder, more technical images. And not being a nurse, and I've come in to support colleagues working with digital innovation and research, and the kind of underpinning assumptions in the nursing discipline have really, really fascinated me. And particularly here at BU, I really, really value the humanization curriculum, which kind of comes from some BU researchers, Todres et al., and it really sort of talks to me about values. So just I'll come back to the chat in just a second, but if we start to go tech, we get that sort of thing. So this is the TOPL review, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, and it's a really good case in point. And if you actually go onto the TOPL review website, you can get your finger and stick it, or your mouse and stick it on this hand, and all the different internodes all move round. So it's very, very techy. You've got flashing lights and an interactive mouse point. And the TOPL review is really designed to look at how we're going to prepare the workforce for a digital future. And it looks at the deployment of digital healthcare technologies across the NHS. And I really like the way it doesn't start with the technology. It starts with patients as partners, with a particular focus on vulnerable and marginalised groups to ensure equitable access. It's looking for the healthcare workforce to have expertise and guidance to evaluate new technologies. And the other thing I love about it was it says what they're wanting to do is to give nurses and healthcare professionals the gift of time. So if we start to talk about technology, that doesn't really sound very like the sort of thing we might expect, a very high-tech review to cover. So a really nice example is there's a 1.6 million searches a day on the NHS Choices website. And if people are starting to do that and to look at their own health, they're starting to kind of just maybe reduce the pressure on the NHS just a little bit. And during the pandemic, the NHS App Store has really started to become a key resource as we've all moved sort of, you know, as we've all moved online. And digital medicine's already changing the way that we interact with healthcare. If you look at things like telemedicine, smartphone apps, etc., you can see that we're really starting to change the way in which we work. I'm just going to pause there for a second. Or Janet, if you'd be kind enough, could you see, are there any sort of descriptive words about the heart and the hands in the chat? You're on mute. You just have to unmute quickly for me. Thank you.
Sorry. Just to comment that the image is the same, but that sometimes reality is very different.
Perfect. Thank you. So the Topol review really focuses on citizens, patients and families, far more perhaps than on the healthcare workforce, which is quite interesting. And if you look at how this is going to be delivered, you can see that Health Education England have got their digital capabilities framework, which comes from the GIS capability framework. And we've got digital well-being as one of the key drivers. And it's this idea about well-being for all I thought I could pick up and weave through my little talk this afternoon. And it's looking at appropriate workforce skills and attitudes to empower patients and citizens to enhance their health and well-being through digital healthcare technologies. And post-COVID, I think we're pushing at an open door. The Health Foundation have got a long read report, and I've just sort of grabbed a couple of little stats for you. They did an early survey with COVID. 3 out of 5 adults that were talking about the NHS used technology in a new way or more than before. There is a but. Those of us aged 55 plus, carers and unemployed are reporting a far more negative experience or more negative attitudes. So I think it's about looking at what the possibilities of technology are, but also thinking about bringing everyone with us. And that takes me back to my title about why technology is contested, because sometimes it can seem that we're using these technologies to try and cut corners, to save time, to take away that human care. And so we'll kind of have a look at how we start to integrate. So I think most of us are very familiar with this, with Roger's work, with the diffusion of innovation. You know, I want my fax machine back. I don't want to do that. What are those weirdos up to? I'm one of the weirdos. And I'm the yay, shiny new tool. But this has been around quite a long time. It's very, very well theorized. And if you actually...
عشان هيك بسمع هون خلص.
Can I just ask you to mute if you're not presenting, please?
It's not somebody asking a question, Janet.
Ah, right. Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I wasn't quite sure if it was a question.
Is there a question out there?
No, let's assume not. We can pick it up when we go back.
Thank you, yeah.
If you go back to the original research, it's based on 34 farmers in some Northwest US state and how they shared innovation on their farms. And I'm just thinking, surely today, with a very modern and complex NHS, we can start to think about scaling in perhaps a different way. And I'll talk a little bit about that. after I've shared with you some current work that I'm doing, which is I'm working with the EU, and they're looking at their digital competence framework, which is very similar to the GISC one. But the EU one, the GISC one is for higher education educators, whereas the EU is much more for citizens. And I just thought there's some really interesting things that we're doing as part of the working group. And I'm on the Framing Digital Health and Wellbeing working group. And these are some of the things that we've come up with that we think should be in the new version. Now, this, I have to say, this is draft working group only, and we don't know if it'll go in the final version this autumn. But it's really important for citizens to be able to apply criteria to digital tools. Are they trustworthy or not? And trust is really important when we start to look at things like chatbots, like Alexas, the Internet of Things, recognition technologies, recommender algorithms. They're things like Amazon, you've bought this, so somebody else is reading that. We think the framework should be used to empower citizens to make informed choices on the use of self-help applications, wearables, and tools, and for their own mental health, but it has to be based on knowledge and evidence. And I think that's the really difficult thing, because if you Google some of these apps, there is enough some hooey out there. And also to build capacity to learn from each other's experience and have the confidence in selecting tools for their own digital health and well-being in partnership with their health providers. So that's just a little bit of kind of context or broader thinking. And this was an EU project I worked on a few years ago. And we worked with health visitors in the northeast of England. And the health visitors and the practice nurses, their working patterns had changed. They weren't all in the same surgery 9 to 5 every day, and they came in and they had breaks and they had lunch together. They just didn't have any time at all to have that kind of informal checking out conversation. So when we said, well, what did they want from technology? I was really interested. Their answer was a proxy for the trusted other. So it kind of goes back to trust again. And the reason I'm kind of sharing this is the Learning Layers project. It was about scaling informal learning in the workplace. And when we looked at scaling, we didn't really like Roger's original work. And the NHS does tend to have fingers pointed at it. Oh, you're slow to adapt, and oh, your tech things don't work, and oh, this, and oh, this, and oh, that. We looked at Deed and Coburn frameworks, where you're looking at dimensions of scaling. And you've got to look at different stages of scaling up dependent on the context. So it's not a one size fits all. So we did a lot of research design and co-design, and we came up with a recommender system, but you know, that's a whole different talk. But the underpinning theory we came up with is that it's about unlearning initial beliefs, values, and assumptions about innovations by all of the stakeholders. And it's really difficult to change cherished values, attitudes, and beliefs. But if you're doing it in a context, you're doing it in different dimensions, and you're taking people with you, we found that it was actually possible. So, where do we start if we're going to start to have huge scale changes, innovations, culture changes for citizens, patients, NHS professionals? And the Topol review doesn't actually tell us how to do that. There's some excellent, excellent recommendations. But sort of being a techie, one of the things I learned when I helped our nursing colleagues go online in a hurry last summer, when everything went online literally at sort of a couple of weeks' notice, was you have to start where everybody is. You can't say, oh, you should be here, or that person should be, this should be. You have to actually start where people are. And emojis is a very simple starting point. And if you look at the little emoji there with the face mask on, everybody understands that. It's cross-cultural, don't need particular language skills, don't need particularly good reading skills. And that's one of the issues, I think, when we move everything online, is we're assuming people have got really sophisticated skills, and a lot of people don't. A lot of people have English as a second language. There are a lot of barriers in the way to enabling a whole population to look after their own health. So emojis basically emphasize and enhance in the way that messages that text alone can't allow. There's a lovely research report that talks about interpretation between who's sending and who's receiving. Harn talks about higher education organisations. We ought to think about using these in informal communication. And even on that wretched MS Teams, if you can still do a little click on the emails and do a thumbs up and things like that. So my question is, could we take something very simple and then start to translate it into sort of the patient and health well-being? So I have, like Michelle, a little task for you. So all my colleagues are going to be absolutely cringing because I always do something tech and interactive. So just have a little look in the chat. Do we know what the first emoji is? Or you can have a shout out if you're in the know. So just have a think about what you think the first one is.
Worried.
Worried, okay, that's a really good one. I shall do the first one. It's a pleading face. Now you might ask where I've got these from. There's an emoji, sort of an emoji lexicon almost. And these are some of the top 10 emojis of 2020. So it's right up to date. So you nurses will be really good at the second one. So obviously it's a love heart, you know, so that's that. Does anybody know what the third one is? Very, very common for, I'd say, for perhaps, I don't want to make assumptions about anybody's name, but certainly kids use this one quite a lot. Does anybody have it?
Laughing out loud.
Laugh out loud.
Well done. Well, rolling on the floor laughing is that one. Laugh out loud is just the smiley one. This next one is sparkles. So if you're, you know, if you're having sort of a discussion about, you know, something light, and then this one, tends to be, it's a thank you or a gratitude symbol. So it can be either taken as like a high five with two people doing high fives, or a lot of people use it as a thank you. So I will just move on and do some conclusions. I'm not going to just leave you thinking that emojis are going to solve all the problems of the NHS. But I think it's, the point of that is it's not as simple as moving online. The main message is, however we decide to move forward, trust is that key word. And the Topol Digital Medicine Panel, their first recommendation, NHS online content should be a vital, trusted source of health information and be appropriately sourced. So my final slide is just a few of the resources, and I'm very happy to share. But perhaps if I just move back, I really like that kind of, that trusted one. So I'm just going to stop sharing and see if there's any thoughts or comments. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Debbie. If you can scroll back through the chat, you'll see some great comments, sort of on the lines of, technology should be there to support, it shouldn't be there as something that replaces, and that's a sort of worry of, yeah, here we are, adjunct rather than a replacement.
I'd really agree with that, Alison. And one of the things that our group that's working with the EU, with the Citizens Panel, is we think no tech should always be an option. And that's where you actually start for, isn't the emoji. It's that you should always have a different solution, and it's really complex, it's really nuanced, and people are all over the place with how they want to react to these things. But I think an adjunct and not a replacement.
And Jacqueline's sort of following that up really, but to say that around some work she's knows about with older people, the challenge not to discriminate and further isolate people, which is supporting the point you made, isn't it? About who can access digital healthcare platforms.
So I moved down to Dorset from London 5 years ago. I still have to get over myself on the train up to London. Dorset doesn't have really good Wi-Fi, robust all the way through. And in this pandemic, myself and my colleagues, we've seen students sitting on stairs with their phones, you know, sort of up like this, because that's where they can get their Wi-Fi signal. You know, it has to be robust.
And another comment around, you know, we all know technology is here, but it's got to be developed with the people doing the work, to complement them really, rather than for expecting people to squeeze into pre-existing structures.
And that's why I think design-based research, which is what I do, and we did on the EU project, is very much, we worked with all of the stakeholders, and we built the design from the bottom up. So there were some of us there that could do the theory and the technology, but it was listening to those users and really getting a really good idea about how they wanted to use and when they would have the time to use. And it's going back and thinking about that gift for time. You know, I think health professionals, nurses, the best gift you can give your patients is your time.
And then around the emojis specifically, I just really, I can really relate to this about when you get one of them wrong, as I frequently do with my children, how embarrassing that is, because you can completely take things in a different direction. But how dangerous that could be if that was like one of the main communication means.
Yeah.
Any more points from our audience? Okay, well, a big round of applause to Debbie and also Michelle. We didn't do that earlier.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, being aware of the time, I just wanted to try and sort of sum up. I have found this afternoon really fascinating, and I so thank all our speakers for their presentations, which have been great. I think the pandemic's really brought into focus this notion of emotional well-being, and it was great to hear from Merzen about some work that had been done some time ago along psychological first aid, and how we can maybe use some of those concepts to think about how we are feeling during these times, and not to be so hard on ourselves in relation to that, and how we can help ourselves by just acknowledging it, and also to help others as well. And that linked in very well to Michelle's talk around self-compassion, and ways of supporting our well-being, and understanding the science behind that, as well as her great exercises on being present in the moment, because sometimes you can feel so overwhelmed, and if you can just take that 1 minute even to come back and focus on your breath, it can be so empowering really. So thank you so much for doing that, and thank you for taking us through that with such a big group. I really appreciate that. And then Debbie's obviously taken us right back down to earth. She's talking about emotional well-being, but much more on the broader front. We all know that digital competency, digital literacy rather, is a thing of the future. But I think this pandemic has shown us how it can be beneficial, but can also be quite stressful too. And it's about taking control of that and making sure that it's used in a way that really is beneficial, both to patients and to healthcare staff. So I think I loved your notion of a proxy trusted other. That's really quite a powerful concept. So I hope, like you've found the presentations today to be excellent food for thought. And can I just ask you to join with me as one final round of applause to our presenters for their time and their interesting presentations today. Thank you so much.